You will marry Mr. Lucas, whether you like it or not. Mama Rose shouted at Nekka, who was sitting in her room, crying. It's barely 2 weeks, Nekka lost her father, Mr. Azu, who was a well-known businessman in Umei village. He has been the only parent Nekka knew, since her mother died giving birth to her, and her father took care of her till she became 19 years old. Her father, Mr. Azu, felt her daughter is now old enough and he needed a new partner, a new wife, as he has been alone for over 18 years taking care of his only daughter Nekka. Mr. Azu decided to remarry. That was how he met Mama Rose, a woman who sells clothes in the market. She had a grown-up daughter named Rose. Mr. Azu felt since they both have grown-up daughters, it will not be difficult for Mama Rose to take care of the two girls, his daughter Nekka and her own daughter Rose, but little did he know that he only signed his death warrant by marrying Mama Rose. At first, Mama Rose came like an angel who had come to bring peace into the family, until she was fully married and she turned out to be the worst mistake Mr. Azu had ever made. Both Mama Rose and Rose herself showed their true color. Due to the daily shouting and nagging, Mr. Azu's health deteriorated, as he already had diabetes. 6 months into his marriage to Mama Rose, Rose and her mother became a nightmare in the lives of Nekka and her father Mr. Azu. Their once peaceful home became a battleground. As the tension continued, Mr. Azu had a stroke and never recovered from it. It turned out that Mama Rose came with the intention to inherit Mr. Azu's properties with her daughter, and she never really loved the man. 3 days after Mr. Azu's burial, Mama Rose invited their family lawyer to come and read the will, so she can kick Nekka out of the house and take over everything. She had secretly made Mr. Azu change his will, and give her and her daughter everything, as she claimed she would take good care of Mr. Azu's daughter, Nekka. As the lawyer came that fateful day, Mama Rose and her daughter sat in the living room, so excited that they are about to inherit Mr. Azu's property. The lawyer sat there patient for a while. He brought out a small note and said, Mr. Azu said, before his will will be read, this note has to be opened first, and then whatever we find inside will lead to the reading of the will. Mama Rose contested the letter, but when she looked at the writing and saw that it was Mr. Azu's handwriting, she sat back and asked the lawyer to go ahead. The lawyer opened the letter and it said, if this letter is being read today, it means I am no more. Please, before my will can be read and adhered to, I need this letter to first be honored. I would like my daughter Nekka to first be married. Before the reading of this will, it will give me great pleasure to know that my daughter is married, and after her marriage, then the will can be read. Mama Rose jumped from her chair. She shouted, what kind of request is this? She quickly grabbed the letter from the lawyer's hand and glanced through it. Then she shouted, no problem, she will marry, I will make sure she gets married. A week later, Mama Rose was in the market with her daughter Rose, when an old man named Lucas came to her and smiled. He looked like he was not from their village, because nobody seemed to know him. He greeted Mama Rose and said, my name is Lucas. Please, I see you are with your daughter. What is her name? Mama Rose quickly glanced at the old man. She said, her name is Rose. Mr. Lucas smiled. He said, she looks like a nice girl. I am looking for a wife. Immediately he said that, Mama Rose cut in. She didn't allow him finish his sentence. She said, really? My daughter is also ready for marriage, and she will gladly marry you. Please, sir, come and visit me this evening so we can discuss the marriage. If it's possible, let's have it as soon as we can. You might be old, but I'm sure you are still very much active. She smiled. The old man stood there speechless. He glanced at Mama Rose, who looked so excited, and said, "Just like that. You have not even spoken to your daughter to know what she thinks." "Don't worry about that," Mama Rose shouted in excitement. That evening, as she got home, she called Nekka and said, "I have found a husband for you." Nekka's face changed. "I am only 19 years old. How do you want me to get married at this age?" Nekka said in her small voice, tears welling up her eyes, "Are your mates not married?" Mama Rose shouted, "Go and get ready. Your husband is coming this night to see us, so we can prepare things for your marriage." Nekka went into her room and sat there crying. Later that night, Mr. Lucas came to visit them. Mama Rose called Nekka and asked her to sit. She said, "This my daughter is ready for marriage. Her name is Nekka. My other daughter already has a suitor, so she cannot marry you." Nekka sat there quietly. Her eyes showed that she had been crying. Lucas looked at her for a while and said, "My dear, how are you doing?" "I am fine," Nekka said, as her voice was filled with tears and pains. Mr. Lucas looked at her for a while and said to Mama Rose, "So where is your husband?" "My husband died not long ago. He was a good man, but he had stroke and didn't recover from it. But we are ready to move on. As you can see, this marriage will bring a smile to the face of this family." Lucas looked at Nekka. She sat there, looking sad. Then he asked her, "My dear, how old are you?" "I am 19 years old," Nekka said, with a voice filled with tears. Lucas looked a bit sad, but he said, "Don't worry, I will take good care of you." Mama Rose shouted in excitement, "So when are you coming with your people?" "In fact, you don't need to come with much people. We will do everything here and you can take your bride." "I will come in a week's time," Lucas said, with a faint smile on his face. As Lucas left, Mama Rose and her daughter were so happy. They said, "We will finally get all the properties that belongs to Mr. Azu immediately this useless girl gets married." The next day, while Mama Rose and her daughter were at the market, Nekka said to herself, "I need to leave this house. I need to run away from this house." She got her things ready to leave. As she opened the front door, she saw Mama Rose standing there. She had come home early to pick up something. She looked at Nekka surprised and shouted, "Where are you going? So you want to run away?" She pushed Nekka into the house and went to lock her in the toilet. She shouted, "The only way you are leaving this house is if you leave the way your father left, or you marry the old man and live with him." Then she went back to work. Nekka was in the toilet till later that evening when Mama Rose and her daughter came back from work. She was so tired and hungry, and she was not given food that night, as a sign of punishment for trying to run away. As Mama Rose opened the toilet door and led Nekka to her room, she shouted, "You will marry Mr. Lucas, whether you like it or not." Nekka sat on her bed crying. 2 days to the day of Nekka's traditional wedding, Mama Rose receives a call that Mr. Lucas was sick and rushed to the hospital. The next day, Mama Rose went to the hospital to visit Mr. Lucas. He assured her that the wedding will hold, that his family are excited and everything is almost ready for the wedding, but they need to give him an extra week to leave the hospital before the wedding will go on. He added, "Even if it means I will be in that wedding on a wheelchair, the wedding will hold." Mama Rose was so excited to hear the news, she started counting days before she can inherit all Mr. Azu's properties. One Saturday morning, Nekka was still mopping the kitchen floor and Rose walked in. She shouted at Nekka and called her names, saying, "How can you be this slow and lazy? Is this how you will take care of your dying husband? I am hungry and I really need to eat, so hurry up and prepare the food." Nekka ignored her, and she got angry and shouted, "Am I not talking to you?" She carried the water Nekka was using to mop the floor and poured it on her. Nekka stood there, tears came down her eyes. Immediately they heard a knock at the door. Rose rushed back to the living room and opened the door. A handsome young man came in. He is well dressed and looked very rich. He introduced himself as Joe, and said he was sent by his father Mr. Lucas. Rose was surprised to see such a handsome man as Mr. Lucas' son. The man said he was sent to see Nekka, to bring her wedding clothes. Rose shouted Nekka's name and she came out, changed from the wet cloth, but her eyes were red from crying, and she really looked unkempt. "I will leave you two to talk," Rose said, as she walked away. Joe sat there looking at Nekka. She had barely lifted up her face to see who was sitting next to her, for him not to notice the tears in her eyes. After a while, Joe called her name softly. Nekka looked at him and was surprised. She whispered, "Joe, what are you doing here?" "My father sent me to bring your wedding clothes." Tears dropped from Nekka's eyes. It turned out that she had once met Joe and had fallen in love with him at first sight. Joe also felt the same way. It was one hot afternoon. Nekka was asked by her stepmother, Mama Rose, to carry a heavy load home from the market, in an empty stomach. As she was heading home, she fainted out of exhaustion. Joe, who was driving past, pulled over and helped her. As he drove her home, he professed his love for her and told her he would come back for her one day. Now he is meeting Nekka for the second time, and Nekka is getting married to his father. Nekka's eyes was full of tears. She tried to hide it, but she couldn't. "It is alright, don't worry, everything happens for a reason," Joe said, trying to console Nekka, as he dropped the clothes and left the house. Finally, the wedding day came. Nekka had cried all night, wishing she could die overnight, but to her surprise, she woke up that morning and said to herself, "It is better to get married to Mr. Lucas and leave this house than stay here and die." With that new zeal, she got ready for the wedding. Few hours later, 5 expensive cars came inside Mama Rose's compound. Their guest had arrived. Mama Rose looked at the window and was surprised. She said to herself, "I thought this man was poor. Where did they get all these cars from? Well, I don't care, as long as I inherit Azu's wealth, I will be fine." She opened the door for them. Mr. Lucas came in on a wheelchair with his son Joe, and a few of their people were well dressed and looked very rich. The tradition is that the bride price must be paid first, before the wife will come out to see her husband, so after the bride price was paid in full and all the gifts have been received, Mama Rose called Nekka to come out and meet her new husband. Nekka came in and stood next to Mr. Lucas, who looked very frail and weak on his wheelchair due to his health conditions. "Now that everything is done," Mr. Lucas said, "it is time to clear the air. My name is Chief Lucas Amugo, and we are from your neighboring village, Aishoma village. The day I came to the market to meet you, I told you I was looking for a wife, but you didn't allow me finish my sentence, and you said you have a wife for me. I came to the market to see you because my son sent me, because he was interested in your daughter, Nekka. They met some time ago and they both fell in love, so I am not here to marry Nekka, but my son is the man who is here to get married to your daughter." Mama Rose and her daughter's eye widened in shock. Mr. Lucas continued, "If you had allowed me finish my sentence that day, you would have known, but you cut in and offered to give me your daughter, so I was excited about that. Like you know, I don't have a long time left, so my son, Joe, my only son, will take over my empire and our entire business. so I promised him that I would get him a good wife who will stand by him and support the family business. Joe, come here. Joe stood up and came forward. Hold your wife's hand. Nekka's face lightened up. A slight smile came into her face. A smile that has not been seen for a long time since her father died. Joe and Nekka held hands. Mr. Lucas blessed them and said, from now on, you are a part of our family. 2 days after the wedding, the day for finally reading the will came. Nekka came with her husband, Mr. Joe. She has fully transformed, looking like a queen and well-dressed. Mama Rose and Rose sat in the living room. They could hardly look at Nekka's face. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, Nekka, congratulations on your wedding. Now that the first request is out of the way, I can open Mr. Azu's will. He brought out the brown envelope and opened it. He showed it to everyone to see that the handwriting is that of Mr. Azu himself. Then he read, by the time this will is being read, it means that my daughter, Nekka, will be married. I asked for that request because I wanted her to leave the house and have the protection of her husband to fight for her, a place that I know I have failed as a father. I could not live long enough to protect her. This is my final wish and my will. All my properties, my businesses and all that belongs to me, goes to my daughter, Nekka, including all my houses. Mama Rose jumped out from her seat and shouted, you lie. This is not the will. The lawyer said, Madam, you can contest this will when I am done reading, but for now, please let me finish. He continued reading. My new wife came into my life to kill and destroy my life. From the doctor's report that was given to me in the hospital, she had been poisoning my food and my tea. Mama Rose jumped up from her seat the second time. She shouted, what kind of will is this? What kind of accusation is this? I will not sit here and listen to this nonsense. Immediately the door opened and the police came in. Mama Rose and her daughter were shocked to see the police. The policeman told them, please, sit, let us finish, then you can follow us to the station. The lawyer continued. The doctor said they found sample of the poison in my food that my wife brought to me in the hospital. That is when I, Mr. Azu, decided to change my will and write a new one, because she had convinced me to put everything I owned on her name and her daughter's name. I leave a sum of 10,000 for Rose. She is not a bad person. She is just misguided by her evil mother. Nekka, if you are listening to this, I am sorry for all the times I could not protect you, but I believe you have found a new home and another man who will take good care of you. The lawyer said, this is the end of the will. Nekka burst out in tears, while Mama Rose was arrested and locked up. Rose took the 10,000 and returned back to the city to live with her uncle. Story ends. Moral of this story: not everyone that smiles with you really cares about you. Be careful who you love. The face might be smiling, but the hearts of men are evil and desperately wicked. I remain Uncle Sam. Stay safe.